So welcome back to certification. Gonna relax a little bit today because today is a kind of a special subject. As you may not have realized by this point, uh, this is coach certification training, and these live streams are really just about going a lot deeper than we have time for in the training sessions. Even though if you've been in the training sessions, you probably already know they do seem like they go a little long at times as well. But that's just because there's just so much to cover. It's kind of a crash course. And so today is actually kind of a special live stream because we're now in officially week 2, day 4 of coach certification training. And now, if you're watching this actually live, then you probably know that we're not in week 2 anymore. And in fact, I've even done a few videos around week 3, or at least one, I think. So I apologize if you're experiencing that right now and it's out of order for you. But if not, then this has been put in order for you, chances are, and it's nothing for you. It's no big deal. So in week 2, as you might have figured out, we're working on accountability coaching. And so this is something that I didn't think of during week 2, which is weird because we were actually literally demonstrating accountability and working on the accountability discipline of coaching, the discipline where you coach your clients such that they're actually going to take actions they never would have taken had you not actually had those coaching conversations with your client. It's pretty magical and miraculous stuff when you really think about it, because had you not had those coaching conversations, your client wouldn't have done those things. They wouldn't have taken the actions that they're just about to take. And it was not an expected thing. It was unforeseen. It was probably not even imaginable by your client, or maybe even you. Not like that's necessarily what you're thinking about all day. Some coaches do. And so you're really causing miracles to happen, right? Anyway, so that's accountability coaching if you didn't figure it out already. So we're talking about today going deep with accountability coaching, going deep with accountability coaching. So why did this come up? I'll tell you why it came up. Because really, like, I almost have a bias around accountability. Like, it's a simple thing. Like, there's not really that much to it. And so I think that's one of the reasons why literally during week 2, we've really only covered one live stream where we discussed more in-depth aspects of accountability at the level that we're really working with it on in certification. But during the training session, I think it was during the accountability training session, one of the students said, Jeff, this stuff seems a bit triggering, and it also seems like it's pretty shallow. It's all about action, and it's like if all you do are these steps, and all you do is create awareness around this and get them to get the impact of this and have them recommit to this, and like, I mean, is you really gonna really have any deep and lasting change for your client? It doesn't seem like it. It seems like you're really not gonna get that. And in the training session itself, I kind of agreed with her. I said, well, this is not about creating deep change per se. The output of this type of coaching is your client takes action. Now, those are miracles in and of themselves, and that's immensely valuable, potentially priceless for your client. So it's like, do we really need to go deep in order for this to be worth you working on it? But, after really thinking about it a lot, and our discussion in week 3, actually, I kind of went back on myself and I started to say, you know what? Accountability is pretty deep. There is a lot of depth in what people get in accountability and what the actual process is and what the conversation entails. There is depth here, and a lot of that depth comes from just your client getting amazing results, because your client, well, we'll talk about that in a second, but the second way it's very much deep is that, or the second way it becomes deep is that you have the mindset that allows accountability to be deep. There is a depth available in the accountability conversation. So think of it this way, and this isn't even in my notes. Think of it like you, as the coach, you bring depth to this accountability conversation. You're the one that's going to make it deep. Somebody took some action, so what? That is superficial. I agree for the most part. But your clients need to take some action. Your clients value what results they'll get when they take those actions or as a result of those actions. And, part of the reason why somebody signs up for coaching with you is because through those coaching sessions, they'll take actions they would never have taken, right? That's valuable for them. So, your mindset about this and your outlook on it is going to make it deep or make it shallow. That's your judgment. It's not the way it is per se. And that's where I think I caught myself after kind of being so agreeable in the accountability training session, is realizing, I'm the one that said that it wasn't deep. Like, I created that, right? And as soon as I noticed how much depth there is and was available in accountability again, and I'll explain why and how that came across for me in this conversation, suddenly it was deep again, So, and for some coaches, that really matters to them. That's really important. Some coaches, not so much. They don't care about that level of depth. But I can definitely empathize with coaches that want to make sure that they offer something that has depth to it, as I know that's me as well. And I wouldn't include accountability in what I offer my clients if I didn't think that that was available. And so sometimes it's good to forget what you already know so that you can remember it again and learn it as if it's new for you. And I think that's what that conversation brought about for me. So anyway, that's what this is about, going deep with accountability coaching. Hey, Lynn, good to see you again. So look, first of all, this I'm going to share with you one of the reasons why I realized and learned how valuable accountability coaching was, and then we're going to talk about depth. So I had a client, probably 17, 18 years ago now, and she, had great goals. She's a great person, very intelligent. And in the coaching sessions that I ran with her, at the end of the session, I would always ask, this is just typical for me, at the time it was, hey, what was the value of this coaching session? Like, what was the most valuable thing that you got out of it? And she would always say the same thing. She would always say, well, I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's what the value of this was. I learned what I didn't know that I didn't even know I didn't know, right? And this is not exactly a new phrase in personal growth. That some of the largest organizations that teach personal growth and transformational work and things like that teach this concept of that there are the things that you know, and you know that you know them, right? And then there are things that you don't know, but you know that you don't know them. You know that I know that I don't know about, I don't know, scuba diving, right? I know that. I know I don't know about that. And then there's this whole entire domain around the things that I don't know, but I actually don't know that I don't know them, right? Like, I don't even have an awareness that there's a domain that I don't understand, right? There's whole domains and worlds and universes out there that are yet to explore that we have no idea about. It's kind of like what they talk about in science and scientific literature, where they'll say things like, when we learn something new in science, it opens up, we answer a question in science, it opens up 3 new questions. And it's like, now we have even more to explore, right? And we answer those 3 questions, and there's 3 questions in each of those domains as well. And so we constantly are finding new domains that we didn't know until we suddenly go from not knowing that we didn't know to knowing that we didn't know, and start actually asking and exploring and studying and trying to pare down the answers, right? Yeah, so like Coach Paco just said in the chat, unconscious incompetence, right? We didn't even know that we were incompetent, right? And even no clue that there was an area that we needed to actually generate some competence around. So then we go to conscious incompetence, probably. We know that we don't understand that and don't appreciate that or don't get it. And then eventually we can move up the competency kind of ladder, if you will. So she would always say this anyway. She'd say, I don't know, don't know. And she'd just say it really fast. And that was always the value that she got from these sessions, like these aha moments. And, she felt it was valuable, and I felt it was valuable. And it was kind of this little kumbaya session at the end. She'd say that over and over and over and over again. And then the next session, she would come back. And, she'd made all these commitments, of course, in the last session, and all these changes she was going to make. She'd come back for the next session a couple weeks later, week later, whatever it was, right? Is time between sessions. And I would ask her, I would say, hey, Julia, how did those commitments go? I'm really excited to hear about, like, what you did and what that was like, and what kind of changes you made and how it went for you. And she would always say, oh, I didn't do any of those things. I didn't follow through, didn't get to it. And at the time, I didn't understand and appreciate accountability. Speaking of don't know. And so I would just talk to her a little bit about it, right? And then move on. And then we'd have another great session. She'd have some really deep, eureka moments and breakthroughs and ahas and the kind of stuff that coaches like you and I probably really just live for, right? It's a really amazing session. And then she'd make some new commitments, and then she'd say, I didn't know, again, in the value, where we're talking about how valuable it was. And she'd go, and she'd come back a couple weeks later, and it would be the same thing, didn't follow through. And she never really did follow through on anything. And so I guess what I'm questioning around the depth piece there is that even though it seemed like we went so deep in coaching sessions, the fact is she didn't do anything different in her life. And the fact is that as a result, her life really wasn't any different. Like her life around her circumstances, her context, her environment, her relationships, her conversations, her jobs, her finances, her business, her health, or like those things really weren't transformed. They weren't any different, right? So, I mean, how deep is it really when that is the way it's that's the way your client's life or business or whatever you're working with them on are progressing? They're not progressing, basically, right? So now I'm not saying she didn't learn some things. I'm not saying that she didn't have some ahas. I'm not saying that she didn't have a really amazing experience in the strategic coaching sessions that I was having with her. I think she did. But that didn't actually impact her life much at all. Now, maybe I'm deluded. Maybe she's transformed inside. And she really has a deep change inside of her. And that's lasted up until this day or whenever she's passed on to the netherworld, right? It's possible. But I wouldn't really know that, would I? Like, how would you know, right? How does anybody really know how anybody else is really experiencing the inner world? Because, I mean, I could just lie to you. I could just tell you I'm feeling amazing today, and it's so different, I'm transformed. And maybe I am, and maybe I'm not. How the hell do you know? How do you know? Who are you to say, right? All you can say is your own experience, and that's all you know. You don't know my experience. You don't know your client's experience. You don't know. And you'll never know. You'll never know anybody else's experience other than your own experience. Now, you'll know what they say to you. You'll know what they do. You'll know the actions they take. You know the context they create around them. I mean, yes, you know the relationship that you guys share. Like there's things that you can measure and actually, observe. You know how they act. But you really don't know them per se. So I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know if there's deep change. And the fact is, you wouldn't either. And if you say you do know, then you have to claim some kind of psychic powers that have never, ever, ever been proven in anything that we respect as as human beings as a basis for fact. That's all. So you can claim it all you want. Doesn't make it true. Doesn't make it true. So yeah, Coach Paco said results are a good way to know what's inside, right? And even if somebody produces a different result, are there not people that produce tremendous results, or even maybe what you might refer to as deep results, or what you might look up to as amazing and miraculous results, and yet the inside doesn't match that? Are there not people who have had phenomenal, amazing results in their life, progress, transformation, things around them, and yet they're miserable inside, or they haven't transformed a bit, the same old person that they've always been? Sure. Sure. You know, sometimes is that not us, right? We go and go and go and go, and then it's like, I'm back where I started, even though there's all this other stuff around me now, right? I've changed my circumstances. So we don't really know. It could be a clue. It's a good point. But we really don't know. All we know is us. So the reason I shared that is just because it just brings me back to, without action and without somebody actually producing something new in their life, it's like I really don't know how deep that truly is. I can't possibly measure it. And the truth be told, even if she took a bunch of action, I still wouldn't really know, like I just explained. But it would be a clue, it would be a sign. It would be one way to see that somebody has transformed enough such that they're taking different actions, that they're operating different in the world, that they're expressing who they are in a different way. So the point is this: accountability coaching isn't just about getting your client to take actions. Although that's the main output, that's the main value that your client is generally going to be gunning for, that they realize and see obviously is valuable to them. Your accountability can provoke deep transformation in your client's being, relationships, and world. So let me show you what I mean. So this is just a kind of a representation more than anything. But think of your client like, you know, like they're a flower or a tree. I don't know what this plant is here. and as you coach them, or as you add things to their world, fertilize them, I guess, whatever. That's probably not the best metaphor for it. You know, they can have some deep change inside and some things that are invisible to us. That's fair. Maybe, right? But on top of that, if they act, they're going to grow, right? So like in this plant's world, they don't move around, but like the action of the plant is it grows, it gets taller, you know, it expands, you know. So action actually occurs, right? And that's a sign of deep transformation, because we know, and we know this in not just physics, but we know this in biology with most plants, that if they grow up in a visible way, that the things that are invisible, the deeper aspects of them, the roots, so to speak, these also need to grow, right? So we can act upon the roots, or we can say, look, plant, grow, and that plant will have to grow deeper roots so it can grow. It just has to. It's the bottom line. I mean, study herbology, or I don't know what the term is for it, right? But we know, like, the grass grows taller, the roots go deeper. That's it. The grass gets mowed, the roots slough off. So this on the top matches what's below. I don't know if it's equal biomass. I mean, I'm not that learned about this area, but I think it's like in that ballpark, right? So if all I'm doing is working on like the surface, and I'm like real shallow, and I'm like, grow, plant, grow, and you're accountable to grow, and they grow, right? I know, in this metaphor at least, the roots had to get more and more, there's always going to be more roots. I don't need to dig the plant up to know that. right? We've studied this enough to know. I know taller grass, deeper roots. Bigger tree, deeper or at least wider roots. The roots are going to grow. Don't need to kill the plant to figure that out, right? Just like in my client, if I know they're taking transformed and miraculous actions, I don't have to chop their head apart and dig into their brain and look at what's happening in the inside to know. By the way, if you did that anyway, what would you really find? I mean, would you really find transformation and miracles? I think there's a good chance that in any situation, no matter if you're digging inside of a, horrible satanic person's brain or somebody who's Mother Teresa, you're probably going to get goo. You're going to get bloody goo at the end of the day, right? You will not find transformation inside someone, no matter how deep you feel it is or what you mean about that word deep, right? But we know in this physical metaphor, we know as this grows higher and bigger and grander, it also has to go deeper. That's just part of the biology of this. Yeah, we're going to actually get to that, Paco. Paco says action affects identity, identity affects action. I think we talked about that last night. So it's in my notes. That's part of why I'm having this conversation with you. So we just know this is going to happen. I don't have to make the roots grow. I'm going to make the roots grow just by having them grow in their actions, so to speak. That action is going to occur. And there's all these other interactions that occur that you might refer to as deep if you want to make that judgment. I don't know, right? Like the roots are going to grow, and other surrounding plants, the roots are going to grow, and they're going to meet. And we know in plant biology that the mycorrhizal fungi and all this kind of stuff stretches out beyond the root, and then these guys meet together, and those roots actually support each other. And we learn now that you don't want to separate plants too much because the barren soil is actually problematic. It's much better to have them crowded, not totally crowded, but close enough together so that the roots actually support each other biologically, because these roots will bring more nutrients into the soil actually. For the air, right? So there's relationships that occur that are on a deep level as a result of this growth. There's a new environmental impact. Bigger tree, more, CO2 is transformed into oxygen, right? We know that, right? And then, of course, we've got all the things these are the things that our clients really want, the things that people get impressed by, the shiny fruit or flowers, the things that are the results, and we can, measure those to some extent. So it's inspiring, right? There's maybe some depth to that too. And then all along the way, all this action, all this growth, it's just an expression of what's inside. As Paco said, they're a good clue to what might be inside. We don't really know, but they're coming from somewhere. And whatever is at the source of all this action and expression and results and relationship and transformation in measurable reality, yes, that's deep, because it's deep by virtue of that it is at the source, right? If I drew you a map of a spring, spring water, the spring is coming up from the mountain, and it's forming a river or a spring lake or whatever. The source of that spring is generally deeper than the spring itself, right? So whatever we see here, there's something deeper, philosophically speaking, right? Yeah, Lynn says action says more than words, right? Yeah, really great. Words aren't even on here. I guess you could say words are an expression, right? So, and there is a certain action to words themselves, but they don't really do that much. And to have real action is also an expression, because, people will talk about action is a form of speech. So if we have freedom of speech, we should also have freedom of action, so to speak, because it says something, who we are and what we do and all that, right? So there's some relationship there, but action is, I think, a much more impactful expression for most people, for most of us, versus words. So this action, so to speak, and the action of your client is only the first step. It's really only the first step in an accountability conversation. Your client becomes someone when they act, and perhaps their actions even transform them. You ever had an experience in your life or seen somebody who had an experience where they said gosh, I went and I went to boot camp, or I went on this journey, or I did this thing, and I'll never be the same now. Like, they didn't just change inside themselves and then they went on the trip. I'm not saying that wasn't happening too, but they did these things and suddenly they're like, oh my gosh, look what I experienced. They transformed from the outside in. They transformed from action and it went deeper from there. So think of the action like the first domino to fall, not the last. The action is this growth happening. I mean, I'm sure somebody would argue that the roots grew first or something like that, but it's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of thing for our purposes, right? So action is only first step. The client becomes someone when they act, and perhaps their actions even transform them. Your client transforms how they relate to others as they transform, and then ultimately your client's entire world, their environment, their entire world could be radically different as a result of them transforming their actions, their being, and their relationships. So when I act, who I am transforms. When I act, my relationships tend to transform. They're not guaranteed, depends on the action, right? But it's likely that relationships will transform. We're going to bump into each other out there somehow. Who I am will make a difference. And every life serves, every action serves either as a warning, like, don't do that, that was a mistake, or an example, like, wow, look this great flower that this plant just created. And the other plants around them see that and they're inspired and they want to grow and compete and, match them and have beautiful flowers as well, right? Obviously, again, I'm stretching the metaphor a little bit. But that's my kind of thesis on this whole thing around the mindset that you could have around depth of an accountability. Because how many of us coaches will be willing to put our client through the paces consistently and have them do the laps and the push-ups and the commitments and just the rigor of that accountability conversation if we didn't think that it's going to make a real difference for our clients in some ways beyond just taking some superficial action? Most of us aren't going to do it. But if you knew the kind of transformation that was available, the reality and the depth of that reality that your client can experience, because maybe you've experienced yourself or you've given it to other clients and you know what a difference it makes, it's like you'll be a whole different coach with them. You'll have a whole different conversation with them. You'll say different things and you'll create more accountability, and that accountability will carry depth with it because you know it's there. You are generating the depth, not something that is just necessarily indelible to the action itself, although it certainly could be, as I just discussed. So what is deep about accountability? Let's get into the mechanics of it, not just like metaphorically, but like what's really actually deep about accountability. So I'll got a couple of these here. So Paco says, me every other seminar. I'm assuming you're talking about the action thing. All right. So what is deep about accountability? Number one, the only depth in your client is their unconscious, right? Like that's the deep-seated stuff. The conscious mind is very surface. Like, well, I'm thinking this right now. You can't, like if you're just thinking something and you're thinking it, that's not very deep. It's on the surface of your thoughts, right? So the only real deep aspect of your client that we've kind of studied in social psychology and those elements, and like not getting into spirituality, we'll separate that out for the moment, just getting the mechanics of this, is your client's unconscious, the part of the mind that you don't even see, the roots that are invisible, kind of where everything emanates from, right? And your unconscious, your client's unconscious as well, is always watching you and your actions. So it's like a recorder. It's like a recorder. So when I do this live stream and I say, well, I committed to do this live stream and I'm following through on it, right? And I know I'm following through and I know I'm doing it with a level of commitment and intentionality, and you get the idea. Like, it's aligned with what I said. My unconscious is recording this experience for me. right? Like I notice some things. I notice who's commenting. I notice me, hopefully, and what the heck I'm saying. Have some idea what's going through me, right? And how things are going if we're still online and all that. But I don't notice everything. But everything is coming in, right? Like what I see visually, what I hear, the sounds, how I'm feeling inside and out, right? Just that whole thing, that whole experience, the temperature in the room. Like I'm not noticing those things consciously, but unconsciously, like everything's being recorded. So like for instance, if we turn the air conditioning off in here, we're in Florida, and even though it's late in the year, it's still quite warm. Like I would not be conscious of the temperature until it got to a point where my unconscious kind of noticed, like my unconscious says, "Oh, this is too freaking hot," and then it brings it up to my conscious mind, right? But at first I was recording it the whole time. I just didn't notice it, but that's there. So your unconscious, your client's unconscious, is always watching. It's recording everything, and it sees you. It's watching you like a hawk. It's like Santa Claus sees you when you're sleeping, knows when you're awake, knows if you've been bad or good, all that kind of stuff, right? So, it's like your client is just being a bad little boy or a bad little girl. It's no wonder that they don't think much of themselves, and that their identity or their beliefs about things, or that their inner, like, deep unconsciousness is just really not happy. Well, no shit, it's probably not happy with them either. Definitely not happy with their results, which is why they came to you. So it's recording it the whole time. And then when that client changes their actions from bad to good, or a little bit to a lot, or whatever this, idea is here, their unconscious notices that. And that creates deeper impact on them that you or I may never notice, but it's there. We know it's there because we can see it. There's like one time I remember I took this training, real boot camp level training. It took like 6-7 months to go through it. And they had us working like dogs. Like we were working like 10, 20 hours a week on all this stuff that like seemingly didn't make a difference, right? And so they said, look, do all this stuff. You got to do all these things. You got to have a lot of integrity about this, take a lot of action. And we're telling you, your life is going to transform. Your life will be different. You're going to get all this confidence. You're going to be like unstoppable. You're going to know yourself as this person that can just get themselves to do anything. And then I did all these actions just for like trust's sake. I didn't really want to. And then suddenly one day I just kind of woke up and noticed, oh my gosh, like I'm way more confident than I normally am. And I thought to myself, why am I so confident today? Like why do I just feel like I've got momentum, and like unconsciously things are hotter. It's like I was talking about, the temperature gets hotter and you notice it. I suddenly was noticing this. I was conscious about what my unconscious was kind of turning on in me. And I really try to, I'm pretty analytical, so I try to put 2 and 2 together, and I said, well, I just feel like I can do things I normally wouldn't do. I feel like I can get myself to do anything. I feel like I'm in action. I feel like I'm getting somewhere. I feel like I'm making progress. And all of a sudden I realize my unconscious mind is noticing these actions that I'm taking that I didn't think mattered. My unconscious mind is noticing all the progress I'm making. They notice how fast I'm moving. They notice all that velocity that's happening. And then the part of me that says, should I confide in myself? Can I trust myself? That's kind of what confidence is like, do I really know who I am, and I trust who I am, and I can count on that person for positive things? Do I have self-trust, or do I like think I'm full of it? And I realized, gosh, most of my life, I've actually haven't been very confident, because I really have thought pretty much I'm full of it, because I thought a lot and I talked a lot and I acted. I acted very little. Like my actions weren't lining up with what I was talking about. So it was all hot air. And then suddenly I'm like, wow, I'm really confident. And guess what? They had us taking all this action. Superficial actions produced a deep result. That's just one example, but hopefully you get the idea. Is this making sense? Any questions about this? So that's just the first piece. Your client's unconscious mind is a recorder, and it's recording day and night. And obviously, when they're taking different actions, they're going to record all that stuff. They go murder a bunch of people. Whatever their unconscious believes about that is going to come out in their sense of themselves and their confidence level. And, that's going to shift who they are at a deep level, right? As to whether if they go save a bunch of lives and they have a commitment to do that, their unconscious is going to notice that. It's going to shift who they are at a deep level. Paco says that's powerful. Rock Thomas would say that the conscious is the captain, the unconscious, all the rest of the men. And they're watching. Yeah, so if your captain is doing dumb stuff, and the actions are usually conscious actions, we're not always conscious of our actions, but 9 times out of 10 we are for the major actions that we're taking. There's so much more going on unconsciously, and all these, like you were talking about, like Rock said, there's all these men that are watching, all these minions that are watching. Is like, okay, should we follow this leader or not? Should we trust this person or not? Should we go in that direction or not? And so if like your captain is doing all this dumb stuff or talking a lot and not doing anything, all your men are going to go in a different direction, right? And all of a sudden you wonder why you're sabotaging yourself, or why you don't seem to be getting anywhere, or why you don't trust yourself, why the confidence isn't there when in the key clutch moments when you really need to make something happen. Yeah, walking the talk, as Paco says. Yep. Yeah, and we're all off in that, as you say, Paco. It's just a matter of whether or not we're aware of how we're off in that, and the accountability conversation is that. It's seeing what we didn't see about how we are not in alignment with our intentions and our commitments and what we really say we're up to. And when you see the difference between how you act and the way you like to look to others and how you like to come off to yourself and others and how you really are, that's the difference. That's what there is to be accountable for. It's like that, and you're not accountable for it, and your clients aren't accountable for it unless you're really actually in this conversation. Really, really good. Okay, thanks, Lynn. I'm good to hear it's actually making sense. So second way that, so I think I wrapped it the first way, is, that the unconscious is always watching, and it notices your actions. So actions ultimately impact your deeper side of you. Second, actions require being. As I think you just mentioned, Paco, actions require being. We talked about this yesterday. So it will take transformation in your client's being for them to actually do most things that your client didn't do in the first place. If they were already doing them, then yeah, they don't need to transform to get themselves to do those things, right? But if they're not already doing them, and they really are committed to doing them, and they really want to do them, or they really want to make sure they get the results from doing them, this plant really wants to grow, but it's not, something's got to transform deeply in this plant so that it can actually grow. So it'll take transformation in your client's very being. How's that for deep? For them to actually do most things that your client didn't do. To do what you wouldn't do, you must become someone you haven't yet become. For your client to do what they wouldn't do, your client must become someone that they haven't yet become. So that's deep. That's number 2. Number 3, people are deep, right? There is depth to people, good or bad. And people are the ones taking the action. Therefore, the actions will carry depth for your client, because the vehicle of the body, the vehicle of the human, the vehicle of the spirit, the vehicle of the emotion and the mind and the unconscious that is a part of your client, that's a part of the action as well. So they carry all the depth with them. Wherever this plant goes, if it's still alive, it's going to carry its roots with them, right? I mean, most plants don't walk. There are actually a few plants, I think, not plants, but like trees that walk. I was in the Amazon rainforest years ago where I met my wife in Peru. We were in the Peruvian Amazon, and there are these trees. I can't remember what they're called. I think they were literally called like walking trees. And the tree, because the Amazon floods sometimes in various places, the rainforest floods, and so these trees, their roots splay out like little mini trees, and so before the tree actually reaches the ground, there's all like these separate trees that are going into the ground that are really just sections of the roots, right? And so what happens is over time, the trees, because in the rainforest, the big thing that they're competing for is light, right? Because the canopy is just really dense. It's hard, like not a lot grows like on the surface, right? There's a lot of dead things on the surface of the forest. But these trees, they actually, over time, they sense where the light is, And so the roots on the side that's the dark side of the tree, they kind of atrophy and they stop growing and they shrink back and they kind of lift off the ground. And then the tree actually grows more roots in the direction of where there's more light. And so those roots extend and the tree slowly actually walks. You know, and we're talking about over decades, right? But it's basically walking around. It's a walking tree. It's just insane. So anyway, it has to take the roots with it, right? As your client needs to take their deep aspects of them with every action that they take. So by virtue of the fact that the depth comes with them, the actions are deep. And accountability as a predicator to action, as a breakthrough to action, as miracles around the action in your client's life are therefore deep by the transitive property. So let's see. Okay, fourth way, accountability is deep. Actions on their own aren't necessarily deep, but the reason why your client is going to take that action is deep. But that's really none of your business as an accountability coach. Like, we don't care about your reason why. I don't care about the reason why you're in this conversation with me right now. You got to work that out. Your reasons are your own. Are your own. They're not. I'm not saying they're only private. Like, you can't share reasons, but you got to work that out. I can't tell you why. I can't give you a reason why, because you'll just take it and argue with it, or you'll take it and use it for a while, then you'll change it. Right? Reasons come and go. You know, actions, once they've been done, like, can't change the past. That's in your past now. It's a predicator to the future. It's the preface to the future that you're living into now. So the reasons why your client is doing whatever they're doing, they're deeper reasons. That's kind of none of your business, but it's still there. Your job as an accountability coach is to provoke the action. Your client's job is to figure out why, as I just said. Actions express something. Like I said, like, this leaf growing is an expression of the depth of this tree or this plant. But my job is to keep them accountable for growing that. They need to work out what's inside. That's their business, but it's still there. You know, and that is deep. The fact that there's a need for, or a reason for, or motivator for, or predicator to that growth, that expression of something deeper. This flower is an expression of something deeper. And you and your actions and what you do in the world is an expression of something deeper. If you're an accountant and you just read numbers all day, that's an expression of what's going on inside of you in some way. It's an expression of something deeper. It doesn't mean it's all of you, right? But it's one expression of you, right? So what I do with you today is an expression of something deeper. How we interact today, it's an expression of what's going on inside. So it's an expression. So we can guide that expression, and there's depth to that. Fifth reason why accountability is deep. Actions impact your client's relationships, and those relationships have depth. So like I said, like, if I'm this tree and there's another tree around me and our roots are growing, and they don't grow down only, they also grow out. Eventually there's a relationship between us, and we can give each other nutrients and share different things. And the soil is a living thing. If you've ever studied this stuff, it's really wild what's in dirt. Like, check it out. In fact, I think wasn't there a documentary on Netflix that just came out? Was it like Kiss the Dirt or Eat the Dirt, or I can't remember the name of it. It's pretty good. It's all about, like, global warming and how the way we treat our soil has an impact on it, because soil is like this living mechanism. It's really wild. So I'll give you an example of this, though, how growth and action produces new depth of relationship. So in one of our trainings, we did an accountability demo, or I did an accountability demo with one of the students, and she started taking all this action since we held her accountable. She had a great transformation and broke through what was stopping her and started taking all this action. She came back the next week and she said, you know, my family is noticing what I'm doing, and now, like, my daughter comes out and does her homework with me because she sees me working. She's inspired, and, like, I've given her something. I've given her, like, the plant gave this plant nutrients by growing and acting. She's giving her child nutrients through her example, right? And that's just one obvious way, right? Some actions directly impact relationships because the action is actually to go form a relationship, right? But you can't help, I mean, do you get that you don't live in a vacuum? You don't live on Mars, right? Like, you're like this ripple effect on humanity. You're just like there is no way that you or I are relating to or accountable for our entire impact on the people around us and the world around us. It's just no freaking way. And yet we are that, and the actions have a deep impact on others and our relationship with others as well. So I'll give you one more example. I'm coaching this couple. They just divorced last couple years, and they're both like really struggling with different aspects of who they are and how they feel about things and what their life is about. And so I got to coach them each individually because they've now divorced, and they still got to like co-parent and deal with each other on a regular basis, deal with finances, all kind of stuff. And so they're both kind of walking around wounded, right? And every once in a while, I can get that particular of the pair, that particular half of the pair, to take an action that is truly a generous action, that is an existential choice to grow and be more and take responsibility and mature and share that with their ex, or discuss it somehow, or represent it, express it to their ex, right? And they're like, I had this great conversation with so-and-so, and like, we're really doing better. And then the other one will come back and say, Sally's different now. I mean, we're good. We're better now. Like, I think we can work this out. So it's like, that's just a great example of how your actions and transforming action, being accountable for something, taking responsibility, transforms a relationship and transforms everyone around those individuals, because that relationship has such depth of impact on them and their lives. So let's see, Paco says, regarding not caring about the why, accountability-wise, how do you deal with a client saying something they want, but they don't really want it? I've had people randomly say they want to run a 5K. It has nothing to do with their goals. I ask why. Is there a better way to go about it? So sure, like, people have all sorts of desires that aren't necessarily aligned with their actions or their goals. That's fair, right? So wants aren't necessarily whys, though, right? Like, wants usually are expressed in external, like, I want a car, I want a house, I want to run a 5K, which is kind of more of an action, but it still can be a desire. Those are expressions, those are verbalized expressions of something deeper. The purpose behind why they want that, whatever that is, right? So as an accountability coach, they can want something and not have any commitment to doing it. And that's cool. Like, there's plenty of things I want that I'll never do, right? Nothing wrong with that. Now, Paco, for you probably will, that will probably be a problem for you, because it'll be like, as soon as it's a want, it's like, I have to make that happen, right? Different strokes, right? Different behavioral styles. But purpose and whys and reasons and all that kind of stuff are, sometimes they're very much connected with a goal, and sometimes they're not, and that's totally okay, right? You don't have to want it. You don't even have to have a good reason why to do something. You could just commit to it and do it, and your client can do the same. And by the way, is there not some depth and maturity and responsibility and an existential intelligence or an existential genius to not wanting something or not having a purpose for something and yet doing it anyway? Committing to it whether or not you feel like it? You don't even really have to have the purpose. And most of the time, people will carry their purpose with them, just like the plant carries their roots, most of the time. But as a human being, you existentially have the option to do it differently if you choose to, for sure. So now, not a lot of people relate to that. Happens all the time. There are plenty of people who have existential power that will just say, this is who I am today, this is who I'm going to create myself to be, and they have no good reason for doing it, right? By the way, didn't we do that at the beginning of certification? Didn't we all celebrate like crazy people, even though there was no reason to do it? There's no reason. We just did it. We just chose to, right? So you and I are living proof, if you actually participated in that it's possible. It's not necessarily the typical thing that you see from people, but it's totally possible, totally doable. And it gives you tremendous power to know that you're not stuck with your feelings or your needs or your reasons or any of the kind of deeper areas that may or may not be a good thing for humanity. Some people meet their needs by hurting other people, right? I don't know if I respect that kind of depth. I appreciate it. I understand it. I need to do that in order so I can work with somebody on a strategy coach level to transform it. But I'm not necessarily falling all over myself in love with somebody meeting their needs by punching me or by killing a person or by stealing, right? That's not cool, right? So some deep things are not good deep things, right? Deep is not synonymous with good, but let's at least appreciate how it relates to what seems to be surface, which is actually much deeper. So sixth way that accountability is deep, actions change your environment. We kind of related to this as when we talked about the plant processing the CO2. So action changes environment. When you act, your environment alters around you, right? And in turn, your environment then shapes you, because we have a co-creative experience with others and our environment around us, our work environment, our home environment, all that kind of stuff, right? So action transforms environment, which then in turn transforms us. Your environment shapes you, but we can also shape our environment through action, right? So there's depth of changing the world, so to speak, through action. And if you change the environment, there's a good chance that that environment will then shape you. Like the fact that we're in a live stream right now shapes how I show up versus if I was just like recording a video or typing an essay or something. I express myself differently because you and I and this particular tech that we have created an environment for me to be more than who I would have shown up as had this not been the environment. Get it? So your environment then shapes you. And so if you take action and change the environment, your client takes action and changes the environment, deep change tends to be inevitable because it'll draw you forth. It pulls you forth rather than just like trying to force yourself and push yourself to do something, right? Seems like it might be just superficial, but it goes much deeper than that. Finally, seventh way that accountability is deep. Accountability is an awareness exercise. Every single step in accountability, other than commitment, the third step is an awareness exercise. There's depth to a new awareness because you drill deeper to reveal what your client is currently unaware of. If I can coach you enough so that you become aware of what you weren't aware of before, there is a deep potential and possibility that's created out of that new awareness. Because if you're not aware of something, you can't act upon it. If you're aware of it, suddenly action is possible that wasn't possible before. You literally have created miraculous possibilities out of nothing through that coaching conversation. How's that for deep? So Lynn says, what do you do with a client that is always negative and that says they're going to do it, but I'm assuming you mean but they don't? You would hold them accountable. You would hold them accountable, right? By the way, one of the reasons why they're always negative could be that they constantly don't do the things that they said they're going to do. I'd be pretty negative if that was me. I've gotten negative even recently in my life as a result of not doing what I was truly committed and expected to do. Actually can change very quickly. That's one of the cool things about accountability is it seems like it's surface, but your client might go from negative to positive as a result of for 2 weeks just cranking on doing what they said they would do if they only did that. If they only had the courage to do it. If they only just did it no matter what. No matter how negative they feel. Sometimes a turnaround is that you feel so horrible, but you do it anyway, right? That's, in a way, what courage is. So let's talk about some examples of going deep with accountability. So like when I first was held accountable by a coach, I had a really amazing accountability coach, and we actually used her as our kind of organizational example or organizing. We took what she did and turned it into organizing principles, and we teach her method of accountability basically, even to this day. And so I was totally slacking in my business at the time, and I didn't even realize it. Like I wasn't aware that that was the case. And suddenly, as a result of the accountability that she gave me, um, I started acting in a completely different way. Now, again, that's the surface part, but at the end of that year, I mean, it was like 6, 7, 8 months of action, just constant action. At the end of that year, I suddenly knew myself as someone who could just do anything. I could just get myself to do anything I needed to get myself to do. And there's a real deep power in that that I get to experience for myself. So another example, we had a student that I just talked about this, how she impacted her daughter, and luckily we saw her when we were working with her. You can still see it on the replay. And she was talking about how fear stops her, and she's just scared, she's scared, she's scared. And the whole time she's talking about how scared she is, she looks it too. She looks scared, she's tearing up, she looks fragile. And I kept working with her on, like, that's not it. Like, it's not your fear that stops you. You're not stopped by your fear, you're stopped by something else. And she finally broke through and realized that she was just being lazy. She used different words for it, but it's basically her laziness, not her fear, that was stopping her. As soon as she got that, her whole face changed, her whole body language changed, her voice changed. She was literally a different person from the inside out, so to speak, or from the outside in, if you will, because it was a superficial conversation. And all of a sudden, there was no more fear there. Like, we didn't see fear at all. And even the next week when she was talking about all her victories, she's like, I didn't see any fear on her at all. She's like this action taker who's confident and knows who she is. She's just owning herself. She had a whole different center, you know. So that there was deep change happening in her, even though we were just doing basic accountability. So I'll give you one more example. So at the end of accountability immersion training, this is in the mastery program, Master Coach University. If you eventually take it, you'll go through this. And at the very last training session, we do what I like to call ultimate accountability shares, where we share our deepest kind of wound or our deepest thing that we hide that we can't ever say to anybody, we can't ever tell anybody. And everybody does it. And it's really tough, but it actually only takes like 30 seconds to do it. And it's something you would think you would never, ever let yourself say to anybody, especially like fellow coaches and your peers that you want to like impress, right? And so as a result of that, by the end of that training session, everybody's just radically transformed. And all they did was say this one little thing. They took this one little action. It was all accountability. But there was a depth to that accountability because they were uncovering something that for them was very deep. For the rest of us, we were just listening to what they said. It's like, okay, whatever. But for them, it was like the deepest thing. And so all of a sudden, they're like awake and powerful and fearless and unstoppable and just like bouncing off the walls and blowing the lid off of who they are and what's possible and feeling elated. Just one action, right? Now, there was depth to that action. I'm not saying there wasn't. I do believe there was. But all it was me holding you accountable for actually having that conversation that you would never have otherwise. And that was what made it a miracle for those students when they went through that again and again and again. I see that every year that we do it because it was unforeseen and unimaginable that they would have said or actually done those things. So if you really want a different life, if you really want to break through and you want deep change, then perhaps all you need to do is to say the things and express the things and admit the things and uncover the things that you would never normally say, admit, or express. And I'm not saying, I don't mean lie, like make some horrible thing up. I mean, share the thing that you can't share, because what you can't say runs you and owns you. It truly diminishes who you are at an existential level, even though you and I both know that you're way more than that. And if only you had the courage to share those things and say those things, they wouldn't run your life. You would not be in the prison of what you can't say anymore. You would just say it and you'd be free. How's that for deep? So let's see. Paco says, question on depth. An ontological coach never answered me. Okay. I can choose who I am and what I do. I'm with you so far. Where does the choosing criteria come from? I know it's a choice, but who's the judge? How does it choose? If this is beside the point, let it okay, right. So who, like you're saying, who's doing the choosing, right? I think that's what you're asking. I'm not sure what you mean by who's the judge. If you're saying like who's the person that's doing the judging such that they make a judgment to choose, right? So when you're really making an existential choice, as you're talking about, not a decision where you're paring everything down, you're trying to like just do whatever those things tell you to do, but you're truly like coming from nothing and making a true choice from from square one, right? Just inventing something existentially. And the power, I think that's what you're talking about in terms of an ontological choice. So choosing who you are, choosing what you do, choosing anything like that, choosing your life, right? Where does that choosing criteria come from? So first answer is, if you're not being your judgment, you're not being your decisions, you're not being all the past things that would imprison you inside of something other than choice, like not even a choice, then those things are not the judge. So you as the judge are not making a choice, or else it's not a choice from that perspective. I think I know what you're talking about. So I think what's important to get about that is that the answer to your question as to who's doing the choosing, well, we know it's not your psychology, and we know it's not your reasons, right? Because you divorced yourself from those reasons when you make that choice. We know it's not your judgment, right? And we know it's not your past because you, once again, you are inventing something from nothing, and your past is no longer, it's no longer the decider, so to speak. Like you're free from that, right? Context of nothing, exactly. So if you can make a choice like that in the context of nothing, the question of who is making that choice, what is it that, who is it that's choosing, or who is choosing, and how does it choose? The answer to that question is, I don't know. That's the answer to that question, because it's not anything other than, it's literally coming from nothing. If something can come from nothing, then what is this thing that's the nothing, right? What is that? And the answer is, you don't know, and I don't know. And you better say that you don't know, because if you say you do know, then you better call yourself whatever is the universe or the ether or God or whatever it is that you think has all this be here, right? Because then you would know that, like, you would have to be the one to say what all that is or who that is, because that would be, you would know that. And that's the unknown, right? That's the whole point. There's something or someone that you are that creates possibilities from nothing, a context of nothing, that truly makes a choice. And we don't know where that comes from. Like, we just don't get it, right? But what we do know is we know it's not these other things that normally made that choice. Like, we can see that. We can kind of measure that to some extent. And we're still not, it's not our decision to judge that either, right? But no, I don't know who that is. And neither do you, and neither does your coach, and neither does anyone who created that construct, because it's, at the end of the day, that's the point. When people talk about spirituality in this way, they say, well, I believe in God, or I believe in Jesus, or I believe in Allah, or whatever. And then, the critical ones will say, how can you believe that? Because there's no proof. Like, there's nothing there with whatever you say exists. It's nothing. And of course, the response to that always is, that's the point. That's what makes it spiritual. Spirituality, call it religious spirituality or not, is based in nothing. It's based in no thing, right? Context of no thing. So there's not some thing called God or some thing called, manifest destiny, or whatever your beliefs are about those things. There is no thing there, right? And so the saying that who does the choosing would make that into a thing, and as soon as you do that, as soon as you try to answer that, as soon as you make it into that, you destroy it. Because suddenly it is a thing, and then you've destroyed the nothing that it was supposedly coming from. And all of a sudden you're back to dogma, right? You're back in the same prison of your existence, right? So anyway, coming back to spirituality, what the spiritual believer would say is that I believe from nothing, No thing makes me believe. That's the point, is it's faith. It's on faith that does that. Faith is believing when you can't see it. Faith is believing when there's nothing to see that allows you to believe, right? Belief in the unknown, belief in, it's just you believe in something that there's no freaking way you'll ever be able to prove it to yourself or others for that matter. That's called faith, right? So that in a way is a choice, right? That's an existential choice. Now, not everybody does it for that, like from that space of no thing. They do it because they saw a statue, or they do it because they saw some art. And of course, we build churches that look really frilly and amazing and cool, and then people look at them and then they feel that and they think that that's that. And of course, that's anything but that, and that's why I think a lot of people recoil from organized religion, because they realize, wow, we've taken this nothing-based phenomenon that's truly on faith, and then we've created a thing, and our worship or our faith is is now based upon this thing, and so of course it's no longer faith then, and we wonder why we've lost that part of ourselves, or why we hate it, or why there's so many dead religions out there, right? Because they killed off the very thing that it was based upon. All they got left is theory, if you will. So yeah, the answer to that question is I don't know, and you are the I don't know. You're a part of that in a way, because you made the choice, right? But who you are that makes that choice is the answer to the question is I don't know. It's a space of endless possibility. It is a matrix of nothingness, right? The quantum field, as Deepak Chopra would say. Hallelujah. Kumbaya, right? That's it. And when you do that and you experience that, you experience your true humanity in a way, and you experience the depth, if we're talking about depth, of creating existence from nothing, and that's not based on anything in your past or anything in your psychology or any reasons or any emotions, any of that stuff. It's not from that world. It's from some other world, and you are in that world as well. You're kind of a quantum creature, if you will, if we want to say it that way, or a spiritual being, if that's the better language for you. So there's your answer. It's not much of an answer, but that's it. That's all. That's the best answer you're ever going to get on that one, I think. So what are some of the mindsets that will allow you to produce deep accountability? And what are the mindsets of accountability you want to really take on? So the first one, we talked about this the other day in training, like a mother disciplining her kids. She cares and loves her kids deeply, but she still does and says what's necessary because she cares enough about them to give them what doesn't feel good to get, right? Sometimes a mother's got to be tough, if you will, or got to do and say and offer things that the children will reject initially, let's say, as your client will reject much from you. That's how you know you're probably doing the right thing to some extent. It's one sign, right? So a loving mother that disciplines her children. Second mindset, committed and responsible. Like, you're responsible for that conversation. You're not responsible for your client's life. They're responsible for that, but you're responsible for the space in the session. And you got to get when you're not being responsible. You got to get how irresponsible you've been and that you tend to be in your coaching relationships, because if you can't get how irresponsible you are or how you're not being responsible, you'll never take responsibility, because you won't see that there's a space for actually bringing responsibility to the table, because you'll think it's already there and it's not. So get how irresponsible you are. Get how uncommitted to your client you are, right? Like, those are things to get, like a good thing. It's a good thing to get that. It doesn't feel good necessarily, but it is good. And that means that there's going to be intensity when needed. If you need to be intense with the client, you be intense with the client. Next mindset, unattached. People talk about like how deep, like you shouldn't be detached because you're like clinical and you don't feel anything. That's not what I mean by unattached. I mean, you're not like a slave to the outcome. You're not a slave to your client. You're not a slave to the conversation. You create it, right? You own it. You own the space. You kind of, in a way, in the session, own your client. And you have no expectations attitude. That's part of being unattached. It's like, I don't expect anything, right? So I'm never like disappointed or flailing from my client having not done something. It's like, great, you didn't do it. Like, let's actually have accountability around that now. Let's go. We got work to do, right? And no judgment also. That's part of no expectations. You have no judgment about your client. You're not saying it's bad that they didn't follow through. It's good that they followed through. None of that. It's like, you could still say great. You can still pat them on the back, but like not from a judgment place, right? Like as soon as you judge your client, you can't influence them, number one. And number two, you can't really be that powerful with them because you're not saying what's there. You're saying what your judgment says, right? Then you're coming from the thing called your judgment. Good or bad doesn't exist in a coaching session, right? It's like those are all judgments. There's just what your client wants, needs, and what they're after in the session. And there's a construct for that. The rest is all judgment and semantics. Next mindset to support you in powerful and deep accountability. Honest and authentic. If you can't be honest as the coach or authentic as the coach in the session, how the heck do you expect your client to do that? So that means no editing. Like whatever is going on inside you, you bring it out and you put it on loudspeaker and you deal with it. And if that doesn't go that well, then what's inside you might need to transform that a bit, right? But get it out and deal with it right now, and then you'll make progress, and your client will as well. At least the coaching session will make progress. And then finally, the mindset of knowing that this is valuable to your client. If you know this is going to be valuable for them, you know it's going to truly transform them in their life, and that it does have depth to it, well, then you'll get in the court. Then you'll be demanding to have this conversation with your client. You'll be demanding to master accountability, not giving me reasons why not to do it. You're already giving me reasons why not to be an accountability coach or not to run accountability conversations with your clients. Even before you've mastered it, you're giving me reasons why not. And that's what we do to possibilities for ourselves and our clients. We get on the warpath to kill them because we be our judgments rather than just coming from nothing and having no judgment about it, right? So knowing that this is valuable, like not like because you've seen it, but like you can create the knowing even before you know it. Coming from nothing, as Paco and I was talking about there. You can make this exist just by creating it from your own expression and action and relating to this like it's going to make a difference. Like your client actually following through on their word and having integrity and being authentic and actually like taking actions that they said they would do 1,000,000 times actually really is going to have an impact on their life somehow. Like actually operating as if that's going to actually have an impact. So no neediness, no pleasing the client, and no looking good. Those are the kryptonite for an accountability coach. Neediness, like I need something for my client. That neediness when you like feel it in a session, like, I gotta get something from them. I gotta get them to do something. Like that pressure, that's attachment. Pleasing, like I'm trying to make my client happy. I'm trying to make them feel different, all that kind of stuff. That destroys the accountability conversation. And then any kind of looking good, like trying to come off a certain way, that just wipes out all your authenticity. So those are the mindsets that I would suggest for you. We will talk when we talk. Glad you were here. Thanks for being a part of this conversation as well. And, really get on the court with this and go deep with the accountability and bring the depth to that conversation. And your clients will have transformation as a result of that over time as well. And, by the way, like where you are, wherever the video is, if you could like it, if you've got value from it, definitely liking that video makes it so others that are like you that want to get this kind of support will actually see this message and get some training for themselves. So it'll make a difference in the world. It'll reach out and relate to other plants or kale or trees or whatever that is, right? So I'd totally appreciate it if you did that. It helps us out a lot, and it helps other people that would never see this if they didn't. And then anybody this would make a difference for, share it with them, before I take it down, because, this is not going to be up forever. It's during training that we have these up, and it can make a difference for your client. This might be a way that you can segue into that conversation with them to really help them if they're your client as well. So totally excited if you could do that. And any questions about this, just let me know, and I'm happy to answer them in the comments. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.